Hello and welcome to another V's Cards video. My name is mvcuic. I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator in Australia. And in this video I encourage you to experiment with techniques and try something new. And we'll look at heat emboss resisting, spritzing, as well as blending with blending brushes. And we're going to experiment and explore the best ways of using a particular stamp set. Without further ado, let's get cracking. I am decorating an envelope treat box and I'm using the stamp set A Fish and a Wish to do some heat emboss resisting. Previously and not shown in the video, I had used my embossing buddy to take away any stickiness of the envelope treat box before I added some Versamark. I'm dabbing my stamps onto the Versamark ink pad and stamping randomly around the envelope. I'm trying not to stamp over any images as I'm doing that around. You can see the shiny sticky part of the Versamark as you're stamping if you look carefully and have some good lighting. I'm going to race through this part of the technique because you've seen me heat emboss many times in my previous videos, but we will get to the colouring part very shortly. When I'm finished using the heat embossing kit, I like to really give the equipment a nice clean by brushing away any excess embossing powder and then using a wipe to wipe it clean. This is to ensure that I don't have any leftover coloured heat embossing powder when I'm using it next, because I could be using a different colour next time round. I'm really impressed with reverse tweezers. I think they do a fabulous job. I did buy a cheap version of reverse tweezers and they don't even close properly, let alone hold on to your project. So that was a bad buy, and the Stampin' Up toolkit is actually a really fabulous buy, so I recommend that. When using the heat tool, have a silicone craft sheet or equivalent covering your workspace so that you don't burn it. Use the second speed and have it on for a little bit before you start pointing it to the project, because you want it to warm up a tiny bit first and keep the airways unblocked at all times when you're holding it. I'm using the clear embossing powder and you're not going to see much of a reaction in real life, let alone on video, because it is clear. But you will see some shine if you have good lighting and you're close to your project. It might look plain now, but once we start adding colour, it will show up and look quite interesting. I'm using two different colours with two different blending brushes, and I'm going to brush randomly using circles and filling in the gaps with the two different colours and blending them in as well. As I'm colouring, you may notice that the fish shapes are popping up, but once I give the ink a wipe where the embossing powder is, you'll notice it even more. Start off lightly and gradually add in more colour as you go. I've ripped a small piece of baby wipes because the images are quite small. I don't want to mess anything up or smudge anything, and I'm wiping off the ink on the embossed areas. I'm also using a cotton bud to do the same thing, just to get into those finer areas, and wetting it a little bit with the wipe. To add a bit more interest, I'm going to use a stamping spritzer which has rubbing alcohol in it and some ink, which is Pacific Point, and I also use some ink of Stella to give it that tiny bit of glisten as well. But it's only a tiny bit of ink, probably a drop, and a whole lot of alcohol. And when I finish that, I'm going back with a Q-tip to wipe off any excess ink on the embossed part. As I'm reviewing my experiment, I discover that I probably have a very solidy type of stamp with all those patterns and images within the stamp. I may have used not the best type of stamp for this project, something with defined lines and no patterns and images. All that watercolour colouring in effect would have been perfect, I think. For my second attempt, I shook off tapped off any excess embossing powder so that it gave more finer lines rather than a thick solid image. To put the envelope box together, you simply reinforce the scoring lines with a bone folder and you peel off the release tape and assemble it together. It is quite straightforward. To all the dads out there, wishing you a happy and blessed Father's Day. You'll see towards the end of the video that I do place some chocolates in this box and something for fishing for Father's Day, so nice and practical for a dad gift. I'm now simply stamping using coloured ink pad to decorate the envelope gift box, as I think the stamp set was designed to do, so I thought I'd give that a go as well. As you can see, this particular stamp set I think is really designed for stamping directly using ink because it's showing off all those fine lines and patterns and texture. And the great thing about these images are that you actually don't need to colour it in, it's just one stamp and go. I appreciate that this is the perfect opportunity to actually make my own designer series paper using this particular stamp set because the colouring in is already done and the images and all those fine lines and shapes look perfect for creating your own designer series paper. So that's what I'm doing here, and I'm going to adhere that to my card front. Typical to many of my recent videos, I'm experimenting first and then crafting 3 different projects in 10 minutes. Be sure to check out my other videos after this one. And I found the perfect stamp for decorating the envelope. If you want to keep your card more simple, then don't worry about the blending part or using the spritzer. I wanted to go with that today as I was creating my own designer series paper. I was on a roll. I'm matching my DIY designer series paper onto Pacific Point cardstock and then onto the card front. I really love the silver mesh ribbon because I think it's very fishy. It reminds me of fishnet, so I had to match it up with this card as well. In my previous video I used the same stamp set and the mesh ribbon, and you can find that in the link below. I decided to make the card a thank you card, and I play around with the different ways I want the banner to look like once I've stamped the sentiment, and it's quite a discovery, but I do end up concluding with a card that I think I like. To finish off, I shape the sentiment and I adhere it with some dimension and add some bling as well. Use whatever bling you like. I'm using the Pearl Basic Jewels. Thanks so much for watching. I hope I've inspired you, and I'll see you in my next video. Take care and happy crafting.